Lesson 51, simplifying rational expressions with like denominators. There's not a lot of notes here. There is a lot of practice to be done. But where we have variables in the denominator, what we're looking for in rational expressions have variables in the denominator. So like down here, we see there's an m in the denominator position. All values that would make the denominator equal 0 are excluded. So normally what they're going to be asking for here is identifying the excluded value. So basically what we're going to do in the denominator is we're going to take just the denominator value, we're going to set it equal to 0, and then solve for the variable. Okay? So we're going to say 5m equals 0. How do we undo that 5m? Through, well, it is multiplication. 5m is multiplication. How do we undo multiplication? Division. All right? So we're going to divide by 5. Okay? 0 divided by 5 is 0. So what we're saying is that m cannot equal 0 because what is 5 times 0? 0, right? So we've tested it. 5 times 0 is 0. And we can't have 0 in the denominator, right? Because what is 3 divided by 0? Anybody know? Undefined or error, but undefined is a better term, okay? So that's why in this case, m cannot be 0. M could be 1, m could be negative 1, right? Okay, but it can't be 0. Any questions about that? Okay, and there's going to be different forms. There's going to be, you're going to see where we might have something. What if we had something like 3 over 5m plus 2? What would I do there to find the excluded value? Okay, so you said set it equal to 0. Let's be more specific. Set what equals 0? Okay, so the denominator here is 5m plus 2 equals 0. And you said we're going to do what first? Subtract 2 from both sides. So I have 5m equals negative 2. And now divide by 5. All right, so m cannot equal what? Not negative 2.5. Negative 2.5 is not the same as negative 2/5. Okay? So m cannot be negative 2/5 in this scenario. Okay? Because 5 times negative 2/5 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. Okay? So do we kind of see how some of that stuff works? Hopefully, a little bit. All right. Let's look at lesson 52. The determining the equation of a line given 2 points. You're going to find a couple of formulas in here for this. A line can be graphed if the slope and any point on the line are known. Basically, if we have the slope-intercept form of the equation. For example, to graph a line that has a slope of negative 2/3 and goes through coordinates 2, 4, the first thing we would do is plot coordinate 2, 4. And if we know it has a slope of negative 2/3, we're going to go down 2 over 3, plot the next point. Okay, next point is 5, 2. All right, graph a point there, then graph a line through the points 2, 4, and 5, 2, and there's your line, right? So that's how we can do that if we have the slope and a point. Okay. If we have, otherwise, if we wanted to know the equation of the line, given the slope and a point, we use what is called the point-slope form. Are we familiar with this at all? Okay, so this is the equation that you need to know. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. You need to know this formula. Okay? Point-slope form. This is whenever I know the slope and 1 point. Okay, and that's going to show up here and there. Okay, where we know the x and the y coordinate. Once we have those things, we can solve for the slope-intercept form of the equation. Okay, are we familiar with the fact that m is our slope? Okay, now your y, where it's just y, and your x, where it's just x, those things we won't substitute. We won't substitute anything in for that. Okay. All right. So do we have that formula written down somewhere? Okay. All right. With that, let's look at some questions for these lessons, because I guarantee we'll go back to that formula and we'll see how it works here in a little bit. All right, so we want to identify the excluded value for the irrational expression. Let's see, Jordan. For number 1, how would I find the excluded value of 5 over x plus 1? Yep, this is lesson 51 question. No? What were the steps? Go back to your lesson 51 notes and look at what they did. Okay, this is why we want to listen really close, because we don't want to get asked a question we're not going to know how to answer. What did they do with the denominator in lesson 51? Are you looking at the notes, or are you trying to go back through and look in the book? Okay. What's the denominator in this question? What did they do with it? Look here. No, look here. Just one thing at a time. What did they do with it? This is the denominator. What are we doing with it? Huh? We didn't simplify anything. What are we doing here? What's the difference between what you see here, 5m, and what you see down here? Nothing? They look exactly the same?
No. 5 times m equals 0.
Okay, and this was 5 times m, right?
Yeah.
And this is 5 times m equals 0. What's the difference between these two things?
That's a fraction and this.
No. I don't want you to look at the 3 over the 5m. Just look at the denominator. What's the difference between this 5m and this right here?
Says equals 0.
Yeah, it says equals 0. So we set it equal to 0. So we take step 1 in finding the excluded value is set the denominator equal to 0. So what do I need to do here? Up here. X plus 1 equals 0. Okay? Now, what did they do in that question? They solved for m, right? Okay? What are we going to do here to solve for x? Subtract 1 from both sides. So we subtract 1 here and here. So x equals -1. In fact, can't be -1. It's the excluded value because, Jordan, what is -1 plus 1? 0. And can we have 0 in the denominator? Which means -1 is my excluded value. Does that make sense? Okay. So if when we are going through an example in the notes and it doesn't make sense, you're not understanding what's going on, please raise your hand and stop me. Okay? Excluded means, okay, so it's not allowed, right? So have you ever been excluded? Yeah. So same concept. It's not allowed as we could have any other possible answer for x except -1 to get a real answer. Okay? All right. Let's see. I want to skip 2 for a second. And I want to find a question. Okay. I want to look at number 5 because 5 has a slope and has a point. Okay? I'm not concerned about the graphs at this point. Okay? I want to know that we can use the formula, right? So my formula is what? Okay. All right. Do I plug anything in for the first y? No. Do I plug in anything for the y1? Okay. What do I plug in for it? 5. Good. The coordinate point. Now, if that had been a negative 5, I would have had y minus negative 5, which would have turned out to be addition because of the double negative. But as it stands, we're fine. So y minus 5 equals m. What do I plug in for m? 1/3. Okay, what do I plug in for x? Nothing. Minus what? Negative 3. Okay, what's that negative 3 going to become? It's all going to become positive here. All right. Sorry, that's kind of a mess. All right, so I have y minus 5 equals, the next thing I want to do is I want to distribute my 1/3. Okay? So what's 1/3 times x? 1/3 x, which represents my slope. What's 1/3 times 3? 1. Okay? Because 1 times 3 is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I got y minus 5 equals 1/3 x plus 1. What's my next step? Does anybody know? Add 5 to both sides. Okay? So I get y equals 1/3 x plus 6. Okay? That is the y-intercept form of the equation. All right? So I could look at this and say, all right, I know that the y-intercept is 6, right? So it needs to cross the y-axis at 6 and it needs to go up 1 over 3. Is A my answer? Does it fit any of those qualifications? What's the first thing I look for in a graph to see if it fits my equation? The y-intercept. All right. Does A cross the y-axis at 6? No. Does C cross the y-axis at 6? Okay. Does it have the correct slope? Okay. What's wrong with the slope on C? I mean, just visually wrong. Right, it has a negative slope, and our slope should be positive. All right, let's kind of scroll down here a little bit. Okay, is B correct? No, has the wrong y-intercept. What about D? Okay, has a positive slope, right, and it should be going up 1 over 3 or up 2 over 6. All right, because this is going by 2's. So I should be able to go up to 8 and over to 6, right? So does that slope and y-intercept work for us? Okay, so we get D as our answer there. Okay, does all this make sense? Okay, we understand the steps involved with that. Let's see if we can go back and look at some of these other questions that we haven't covered. All right. We have 2t squared minus 6t over t minus 3. It says simplify the rational expression. We want to identify any excluded values. Let's go ahead and identify the excluded value first. How do I find the excluded value, Christian? T minus 3 equals 0. Okay. Now what? Add 3 to... Okay, so t equals 3. So does t equal 3 or does t not equal 3? We want to put a line through it like that, right? Because what is 3 minus 3? 0, and can my denominator equal 0? Which means 3 is my excluded value, right? And I think, you know, that you'll... Now, is 0 minus 3 0? No. So could we get rid of D as an option? Okay. And we know that there is an excluded value, so it's not C. So we know it's got to be either A or B, right? Yeah? Okay. So for this next part, all right, we have already solved that. We want to simplify the rational expression. We want to do that by factoring the numerator. Okay? What can I factor with the numerator? What can I factor out of the numerator? Can I factor out any coefficients for, we're just looking at this all by itself as if the denominator did not exist. Can I factor anything out of that? 2t. Okay, so if I factor out a 2t, what's left inside? T minus 3. So if I look at it like this, okay, does anything cancel out? T minus 3 cancels out, which means the simplified expression is what? 2t. And my excluded value was 3. Okay, do we see how we get B as an answer? Okay. All right. Let's see. We have in number 3 the rate of heat loss from a metal object. Heat loss, the rate of heat loss from a metal object is proportional to the ratio of its surface area to its volume. I want to make sure on this, make sure this is a question from this lesson. 3. 51 question. Okay, I kind of want to go back to, let's look at 4. Because I'm afraid number 3 will take up too much time and won't profit us that much. We have, this one just wants us to simplify. We have 9z over h to the 5th minus 4z over h to the 5th. Okay, what are these two things? I'm not trying to ask you a complicated question. It's a really simple question. So don't think of it overcomplicated. It's something that we should know. It's kind of obvious, but maybe so obvious we don't see it. What are those two things? They're fractions. What do I want to do with those two fractions? Subtract them. What do I have to have in order to subtract two fractions? Do I have common denominators? Yes. So can I subtract them? Okay. So when I'm subtracting fractions, does my denominator change? No. So I should get over what? Over h to the 5th. So I have 9z minus 4z. What is that? 5z. Okay. Was that question easier than it looked? Yeah. Okay. 5z over h to the 5th. Okay, move on from there. Okay, a lot of math is just being able to identify what are these two things, what is it do I need to do, what are the rules to that. Okay, we've done 5. Okay, question 6 says use the point slope form of the equation, and they actually set it up for us to identify a point the line passes through in the slope of that line. So everything that we need is already there. Okay, we don't actually even have to solve the equation or do anything like that. It just wants to know what is the slope. Just looking at our point slope form of the equation, what is the slope from what we see up there? 7/3. My slope is 7/3. So we automatically know it's not C, it's not D, right? Because 3/7 and 3/7 are not what I need. Does anybody know, based upon what's up there, what are the coordinates of the point being used to make up that equation? What number represents the x coordinate? 3 or negative 3? Positive 3. Because my equation is y minus y1, right? Where y is positive, and x minus x1, where x is positive. So just 3. What about my y value? 8. Okay? So 3/8, and a slope of 7/3. Was that easier than it looked? Okay? Don't make things more complicated, because I could see somebody trying to simplify that down to the slope-intercept form of the equation and drawing a graph and plotting a point and doing another point and, just making it a lot more than it needs to be, right? Okay? All right? Here, we want to write the equation in point-slope form for the line that has a slope of 6 and passes through -8, -7. Okay? So help me out here. I'm going to write y what? Okay, so we're going to write the equation first. That's fine. Y minus y1 equals, keep going. Uh-huh. Okay, good. Now, Christian, help me out here. Do I plug in anything for the first y? No. Okay. What do I plug in for y1? -7. Okay. All right. What do I plug in for m? 6. Yeah, it's odd when it's not a fraction, right? We sometimes think, well, there's something must be wrong there because slope is always a fraction. Okay, no, you're fine. What do I plug in for x? Okay. What do I plug in for x? -8. Okay. Can I simplify this at all? Is that it? Is that good? Okay, so I'm going to write y what? Y plus 7 equals 6x plus 8. Okay. Does that match any answers we see up there? It doesn't? D. Were you looking at a line below? Okay. Okay. Now, this next one requires an additional step. Okay. Have we talked about the slope formula? How do we find slope given 2 points? Does anybody remember what that formula is? Because that's what we need. Perfect. Now, I don't know if everybody heard that or not. So, this is backwards to what I want to do. This is not. I'm just going to come over here and do it. Okay. So the first thing that we have to do with this, before we can put it in that point slope form, is we need a slope. We have 2 points. We only need one of them, but we do need a slope, right? So our formula, in case somebody forgot it, is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, what is my y2? Clayton, what's y2 given those 2 coordinates? 4. So 4 minus what? 4 minus 7. Good. That's an easy mistake to make. Okay. Over, let's see, Abby. I got 4 minus 7 over, what's my x2? Question 8. What am I going to use for x2? Yep, 7 minus what? 7 minus 3. Okay. Reagan, what's 4 minus 7? -3. What's 7 minus 3? 4, so my slope is -3/4, right? Okay, so we're going to use this for my slope. Which coordinate do I want to use for my x1, y1? Jeremy, what do you think? 3, 7 or 7, 4? You want to do 7, 4? Okay. All right, so I'm going to write y minus what? We're using point slope form. Y minus is 7 a y or is 7 an x? Y minus 4 equals what? What is my slope? Negative 3/4. Okay, so we've set it up correctly. Write an equation in slope-intercept form. This is point-slope form, right? So we're not in the right form yet, so it does mean I have to go ahead and solve it out. So I have y minus 4 equals negative 3/4 x. Okay, now I need negative 3/4 times negative 7. So negative times negative is a positive, so I'm going to go ahead and put a positive in there. What's negative 3 times negative 7? That would be what? Positive, what's 3 times 7? 21. And that 7 is over 1. What's 4 times 1? Yeah. All right. So we'll leave it as 21/4 because I'm pretty sure that's not going to reduce, right? Now what do I need to do? Add 4 to both sides. Now, to go ahead and save myself a little bit of trouble, right, I'm going to try to add two fractions together that I know aren't going to have a common denominator because the fraction of 4 is 4 over 1, right? So I would have to multiply the numerator and denominator by 4 to get a numerator or to get a denominator of 4, right? So what's 16 or what's 4 times 4? 16. So 16/4 is the same as 4. So I get y equals negative 3/4 x. What is 21 plus 16? What is that, 37? 37/4? I'm going to guess that that's not going to reduce because 37 is prime, which is fine because we find that answer right there. Okay? So be prepared that you might get an answer that looks unlike answers that you've seen before. It may look complex. Okay? All right. We still have a few minutes left here. You have questions from, I think you got on 51 A through J, and 52 is what, A through E? Something to that effect. So if you want to pick out a question from somewhere in there. Is it about this? Because if it's about homework or about a quarterfinal or something like that, then I want to address it after the... Okay. $51. Okay, so you're saying you're on 51B. So you have P plus 2 over P plus 4, right? The numerator does not affect the excluded value. Okay? So you're not worried about the numerator when looking at the excluded value at all. Okay? Now, you'll look at the numerator whenever you're trying to simplify the expression if it asks you to simplify the expression. Does that make sense? Okay. But until you get to that point, the numerator is just there as a placeholder, okay, in terms of the excluded value question. Are there any questions from either of those lessons that you want to look at before I let you guys go off on your own? Going once? Aye. On what, 51? Okay. All right, simplify each rational expression if possible. And we seem to kind of do these a fair bit. So we have what? Is it 6m to the negative 2, or is it something different? Because sometimes our books are different. 6m to the negative 2 into the fourth plus 3m to the negative 2 over n to the negative fourth. Okay. My recommendation is to first get the denominator out of the denominator. Okay, how do I move that into the negative fourth so that everything is in the numerator position? Okay, so move it up, and as I move it up, it becomes into the fourth, right? It gets the opposite sign. Now let's look at these two things. I've got 6m to the negative second into the fourth, 3m to the negative second into the fourth. Are these like terms? Yeah. Okay. So here I'm looking at what is 6 plus 3? 9. So we add our coefficients. We have m to the negative second in to the fourth, and that's how they want you to leave it. You could potentially write this as 9 into the fourth over m squared. Sorry, that looks a little ugly. I would accept either of those answers, but this one is what they're going with. Okay? Okay, anything from lesson 52? Or do we feel like we kind of got a handle on the point slope form? Okay? All right, then I will close shop here.